U.S. strikes. Drug vessel off Venezuela. Trump expands Warfront. Some wars start with gunfire, and some wars start with narratives. The headline may seem simple. U.S. attacks drug vessel off Venezuelan coast. But if you read only the headline, you miss the real plot. Because behind every missile is a message, and behind every message, a political calculation. What if I told you this attack might be less about drugs and more about dominance, less about security and more about power? The world was taken by surprise, but the mentor knows. Nothing happens by chance. Trump didn't just expand a military front. He expanded the sphere of influence, control, and fear. It's a move as bold as it is controversial, fighting crime with war and justifying war with morality. Sound contradictory? That's precisely what makes it brilliantly dangerous. Because when right and wrong intertwine, public opinion divides, and power gains ground. And herein lies the paradox few see. The more we talk about peace, the more we fuel war. The more we promise security, the more we sow chaos. But those who observe closely notice something fascinating. All this tension reveals a new chapter in modern geopolitics, a chapter where the map of the world begins to reshape itself before our eyes, and where the real battle may not be taking place on the seas, but in our minds. The naval attack and the symbolism behind the action. On the surface, it seems like just another routine military operation. A boat intercepted, drugs seized, fleeting headlines. But for those who look beyond the news, it's clear that what's at stake goes far beyond the trafficking route. Every ship's movement, every shot fired on the high seas, carries symbolic weight, that of showing the world who sets the rules. Just as in a game of chess, the first pawn to advance is never alone. It announces a strategy. Trump knows this. He understands the power of narrative and the power of image. An attack in Venezuelan waters isn't just about drugs. It's a statement of presence. It's the kind of action that speaks volumes even in silence, because it awakens conflicting feelings. Pride in some, fear in others. The mentor observing the scene understands that modern warfare rarely begins with gunfire, but with carefully constructed perceptions. For the average citizen, it's easy to think the news ends there, a ship destroyed and the problem solved. But the real story begins precisely at this point. When power moves, it never does so impulsively. There's always a hidden agenda, a veiled intention, a next step that hasn't yet been announced. And this step, silent and calculated, is about to redefine the balance of power on the continent. The real motivation, power, influence, and political narrative. Behind every military move, there's always a story hidden on camera. While the public sees an attack on a drug boat, strategists see an opportunity to reassert dominance. The attentive mastermind knows. It's not just about fighting crime, but about controlling the discourse. Modern warfare isn't fought just with missiles, but with headlines. And whoever controls the narrative controls fear, admiration, and even the perception of justice. Trump, in expanding his front, isn't just seeking enemies, he's seeking a platform. He understands that every military gesture resonates as a symbol of power, especially at a time when the country needs a hero who embodies strength and resolve. It's a move that echoes the ancient lessons of leaders like Churchill and Roosevelt. When people are divided, an act of war can unite them, even if out of fear. Political strength is born from the spectacle of power. And this is where the geopolitical chess game reveals itself. Each attack is also a coded message to allies and rivals. By targeting Venezuela, Trump speaks to Moscow, Beijing, and the American people themselves. It's the kind of move that makes the world hold its breath and ask, what is the real objective? The mentor smiles, because he already knows. Where there's power, there's always a bigger plot waiting to be told. Global reactions and the international echo. No power movement happens in silence, and the Caribbean Sea has never been louder. The attack provoked a wave of reactions that crossed oceans. At the United Nations, the words "sovereignty violated" echoed loudly, while European foreign ministers rehearsed cautious speeches. Some called the act necessary, others reckless. The mentor knows the world is rarely divided by ideology. It is divided by interests. Russia, as expected, raised an eyebrow before even raising its voice. China reacted with strategic silence, the kind of silence that says much more than a public statement. Meanwhile, Latin American countries, somewhere between perplexed and fearful, began to revise their own defense pacts. It's like a stone thrown into a lake. The initial impact is small, but the ripples reach all shores, and each shore reacts according to what it has to lose. As the analysts try to decipher the puzzle, the mentor observes another detail. Global public opinion has shifted. It's not just about politics or war, it's about perception. Social media has turned ordinary citizens into real-time analysts, and diplomacy now has to deal with hashtags as much as treaties. The world watches, comments, and chooses sides. And amidst this noise, a new question begins to emerge. What will come after this international echo? The role of Latin America and the fear of escalation. Latin America watches the unfolding events with a heart torn between caution and distrust. Countries that not long ago were fighting for economic stability now find themselves beset by a tension they didn't choose. The mentor realizes that the fear of escalation stems not only from the bombs, but from the invisible consequences. The political impact, the increased militarization, and the risk of becoming pawns in a game played by giants. Brazil, for example, tries to balance neutrality and pragmatism, knowing that any misplaced word could cost trade alliances. Colombia, with a history of counter-narcotics cooperation, faces the dilemma of supporting American rhetoric without igniting tensions with its neighbors. Meanwhile, the Caribbean countries, small but strategic, look out to sea as if observing a slowly approaching storm. Everyone knows one miscalculation is enough, and the entire continent can be engulfed in the maelstrom. But the mentor understands something few admit aloud. Wars are not spread by tanks alone, but by ideas. Fear is contagious. It infiltrates headlines, barroom conversations, and political decisions. And when fear becomes the driving force of nations, reason falls silent. It is in this silence that alliances are broken, and the shadows of the past return to dance on the same stage that history swore never to illuminate again. The hidden consequences: economics, diplomacy, and public opinion. While the spotlight focuses on the roar of weapons, the real battlefield shifts behind the scenes. Economists warn, each missile launched costs more than the annual budget of small countries, and each sanction imposed reverberates on stock markets around the world. The mastermind knows that war is also a business, and an expensive one. When the dust settles, someone will have to pay the bill, and the price almost never falls on the one who pulled the trigger. Diplomatically, the impact is even more subtle, and perhaps more dangerous. Alliances are quietly reconfigured. Treaties are revised in the shadows of cabinets, and new pacts emerge under security pretexts. Countries that were once partners become potential rivals, and the rhetoric of fighting evil begins to sound like a distant echo of ancient justifications. History, after all, has a strange habit of repeating itself when no one is paying attention. But the mentor sees a third front: public opinion. In a hyper-connected world, where every citizen is a microphone, the narrative changes in minutes. Today, an attack is applauded. Tomorrow, it's questioned. The line between hero and villain dissolves under the weight of information. And when the people begin to distrust the official story, power trembles, not because of the bullets, but because the collective consciousness begins to awaken. And that's precisely when the real war begins. Ultimately, perhaps the real war isn't fought at sea, but within ourselves, between what we believe and what we accept without question. How many times have you believed the first version of a story without looking at what was behind it? How many times has fear made you accept decisions that, in calmer times, you would never support? The mentor smiles because he understands. Power doesn't rule by force, it rules by narrative. Now that you understand the hidden layers of this conflict, consider what's being constructed in the silence of the headlines you read every day. Who is defining what's right or wrong in the world, or in your own life? Perhaps true awakening begins when we stop consuming news and start deciphering it. And that, my friend, is the beginning of intellectual freedom. So tell me, what do you see behind this war? What does it reveal about the world and about us? Leave your opinion in the comments, share your insights, and of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because there is still much to be revealed. The battles of the future will not be fought with weapons, but with information. And here, you will learn to see what no one else is seeing.